The key tag was shaped like a plastic sunflower, which was an insulting thing for a weapon to be. It swung from my finger at 6:03 on a Monday morning, bright yellow, cheerful, scratched along one petal where my roommate Mina had once used it to scrape dried nail polish from her desk, and cold enough against my palm that I could feel the exact moment my second life finished loading into my bones. I was standing outside dormitory with one slipper on, one sneaker in my hand, and my hair still damp from the shower I had taken in another life 6 years ago, the same shower after which I had found the door to room 509 locked from the inside, my clothes gone, my exam admission packet shredded in the recycling bin, and 3 girls on the other side of the wood laughing quietly enough to deny it later. In that first life, I had banged on the door until my knuckles split. I had begged because the morning gate closed at 8, because the final ranking exam decided scholarships and placements, and the merit list that could lift a poor girl out of a borrowed life, because everything I owned that proved I belonged was behind that door. Mina had opened it at 7:41, wearing my cardigan, looking sleepy and sweet in the way cruel girls always looked when witnesses arrived. She said I must have forgotten my key. Sarah said I must have misplaced my packet. Junie said I was hysterical. By noon, I had missed sign-in, lost my place on the list, and become the cautionary tale teachers used when they wanted to pretend poverty was just poor organization. By Friday, the 3 of them were ranked above me. By graduation, they called it a misunderstanding. By the time I died in a rented room with rejection letters stacked beside my bed, I had learned that locked doors do not only keep people out. Sometimes they keep the truth in. So when I came back and felt that ridiculous sunflower key in my hand, I did not cry. I did not run upstairs. I did not pound on room 509 while my old panic rose up to perform for people who had already rehearsed how to ruin me. I walked across the courtyard in one slipper and one sneaker, past the fountain with the cracked marble swan, past the laundry room window glowing blue in the dawn, and straight into the housing office before anyone else in dormitory had woken up enough to lie. The housing office opened at 6 for emergencies, which nobody remembered except girls who had once needed help and found none. Behind the counter sat Mrs. Pell, the night supervisor, wrapped in a gray cardigan and stirring powdered milk into coffee with the same pen she used for incident reports. In my first life, I had run to her after the lockout, breathless and shaking, and she had told me dorm disputes required a written complaint, 2 witness statements, and patience. Patience. As if patience could unlock a door. As if patience could restore a missed gate. As if the world did not reward girls like Mina for turning every rule into a rope. This time, I placed the sunflower key on the counter before she could ask why I was half-dressed. "I'm returning my dorm key early," I said, and my voice came out so calm that even I looked for the blade hidden inside it. Mrs. Pell blinked at the key, then at my slipper, then at the clock. "Final candidates are not supposed to vacate during exam week." "I'm not vacating," I said. "I'm surrendering access to room 509 for safety reasons and requesting temporary supervised accommodation in the old infirmary wing. I also need the return log now with the time, my student ID, and confirmation that I no longer possess a working key to that room." The pen stopped moving in her coffee. There are sentences adults do not expect from girls they think are weak. Safety reasons is one. Log now is another. No longer possess is the kind of phrase that makes a board supervisor sit straighter because it smells like paperwork that might later bite. Mrs. Pell asked whether I was accusing my roommates of something. I said no, not yet. That was important. Accusations could be dismissed as drama. A key return was a fact. A timestamp was a nail. A housing log was a coffin beginning to assemble itself around a lie. She pulled out the access ledger, the real paper one that existed because the Academy's expensive digital system failed whenever rain touched the East server room, and wrote my name in blue ink. I watched every letter form. Livia Arden. Room 509. Key returned. 609. Temporary accommodation requested. Student escorted, pending review. Then she slid the register toward me. I signed under her signature, took a photo with my phone, emailed it to the housing board, copied the student conduct office, and only then let my knees shake. The old infirmary wing smelled like closed windows, metal bed frames, and the lemon cleaner staff used when they wanted a room to feel less haunted. It sat behind the library, separated from the main dorms by a covered walkway where pigeons nested in the beams and nobody went unless they were sick, punished, or smart enough to disappear. Mrs. Pell gave me a temporary access card in a red paper sleeve, not a key, and walked me there herself because the policy manual said emergency relocations required staff escort. Every step felt like cutting a thread. In my first life, my room had been a battlefield decorated with fairy lights, Mina's perfume bottles lined up by the mirror, Sarah's velvet headbands hanging from the bedpost, Junie's stack of borrowed novels, my corner pressed against the radiator with my books in a plastic crate because they said my old suitcase made the room look sad. I had believed keeping peace mattered more than claiming space. I had lent them my iron, my notes, my charger, my blazer, my silence. When Mina joked that poor girls made good roommates because we were grateful for anything, I smiled because anger felt expensive. When Sarah read my scholarship essays aloud in a dramatic voice, I laughed because humiliation was easier if I helped carry it. When Junie borrowed my uniform blouse and returned it with foundation on the collar, I washed it before dawn and said nothing. Girls like them do not begin by locking you out. They begin by making you grateful for the lock. In the infirmary room, I placed my half-packed bag on the bed and opened the emergency packet I had hidden inside the lining years before I knew I would need it. Copies of my exam admission slip, a second ID, a plain uniform, a folded statement written in my first life after nobody cared anymore, now useless as evidence, but useful as memory. I read the first line once. On the morning of the final ranking exam, my roommates prevented me from entering room 509. Then, I tore that old statement in half. Not because it was false. Because this time, I would not beg the past to explain itself. I would make the present speak. At 6:46, Mina called me. Her name filled my screen with a little heart emoji she had added herself when she borrowed my phone to fix my contacts, and for a moment my thumb hovered above decline like a girl about to touch a flame she already knew was hot. I answered. "Where are you?" she asked. "Sweet first, always sweet first." Behind her voice, I could hear drawers opening, a wardrobe door thudding, Sarah whispering something sharp. "Morning," I said. "I'm getting ready." Silence stretched. Mina hated answers that did not contain location. "In the bathroom?" she asked. "No," another pause. Then Junie's voice, muffled but close. "Ask if she has the spare key." Mina lowered her tone. "Livia, don't be weird. We need the room key." Sarah's key card isn't scanning, and Junie left hers in the laundry room. In my first life, this was where I apologized for existing inconveniently. This was where I ran back, handed over my key, and let them control the only door between me and my future. This time, I looked at the red temporary access card on my desk and smiled. I returned my key to housing. "You what?" The sweetness cracked so cleanly, I almost admired it. "I returned it," I repeated. "Early. It's logged." The whispering stopped. I imagined them standing in the room I no longer had access to, surrounded by their planned mess, my old drawer probably open, my exam packet probably in Mina's hand, waiting for the moment when they would lock me outside and call me careless. Without my key, the plan did not disappear. It changed shape. Cruel people are creative when interrupted.
Mina exhaled softly.
"Why would you do that without telling us?" "Because it was my key. That room is shared. The access isn't." Sarah snatched the phone then. I knew from the sudden rustle and the perfume-thin anger in her voice. "Listen, nobody has time for your scholarship girl martyr act. We have inspection at 7:30 and final sign-in after that. If housing thinks you moved out, we'll all get cited. Come back and fix it." I glanced at the clock. No, that one syllable felt strange in my mouth, like a language I had studied for years but never dared speak aloud. Sarah laughed once, hard and flat.
"Fine.
"Stay wherever you are. But if we get penalized because you ran off, don't cry when your name drops." "I won't," I said, and ended the call before she could hear that I meant it. Their first mistake was trying to make my absence look like abandonment. At 7:12, An anonymous complaint arrived in the housing office inbox claiming I had vacated room 509 without notice, removed communal property, and created unsafe conditions for my roommates before a major examination. Anonymous complaints at Ashbourne Academy were never anonymous if you knew where to look. The language was Sarah's. Communal property, unsafe conditions, major examination. She wrote like she was already drafting her own defense. In my first life, that complaint had arrived after the lockout, and by then it sounded reasonable because I was the girl standing in a hallway crying without shoes. This time, Mrs. Pell forwarded it to me with a curt question. Did you remove any shared property? I replied within 90 seconds.
No.
I returned my personal key at 6:09 and relocated under staff supervision. I have not re-entered room 509 since. Please preserve the corridor footage and room access logs. Words matter.
Preserve sounds different from check.
Logs sounds different from drama. By 7:23, the deputy housing director had been copied in. By 7:29, the complaint had stopped being a roommate issue and become an access dispute. Meanwhile, inside room 509, the girls escalated exactly as I remembered they would. Mina loved soft sabotage, hiding things, misplacing forms, turning panic into personality flaws. Sarah loved official sabotage, complaints, signatures, phrases that made adults nod. Junie loved crowd sabotage, sending messages that made everyone else laugh before the victim even knew there was a joke. At 7:31, the class group chat lit up. Junie posted a photo of my empty corner with my blanket folded badly and my crate missing because I had taken it during the night. Caption: Guess someone couldn't handle finals pressure. Mina replied with a crying emoji. Sarah wrote, Hope she doesn't blame us later. In my first life, I had seen those messages hours later and felt my stomach hollow out. This time, I screenshotted them from the infirmary bed, attached them to my existing email thread, and wrote, Additional concern. Roommates are publicly framing supervised relocation as instability. Please advise whether I should attend sign in separately from dormitory E. The reply came from the deputy director himself. Attend through supervised candidate check-in. Do not return to room 509. Security will escort if necessary. I stared at those words until they blurred. Do not return. In my first life, every adult told me to go back and solve it quietly. In this life, quiet belonged to me. The final ranking exam did not begin with the test. It began with the list. Ashbourne Academy worship lists, dorm lists, merit lists, scholarship lists, conduct lists, waiting lists, lists of girls who smiled correctly and girls who needed monitoring. At 8 sharp, every final candidate had to sign in at the merit hall using her dorm status, exam admission packet, and room clearance slip. It was supposed to prevent last-minute cheating, identity swaps, and unregistered tutoring materials from entering the hall. In practice, it gave girls with influence one more checkpoint to weaponize. In my first life, I reached the desk at 8:07, shaking, breathless, my hair wet, my admission packet wrinkled from being pulled out of the recycling bin. Mina had already signed the room 509 clearance slip without me. Sarah had told the monitor I was emotionally unwell. Junie had offered to carry my bag, then somehow my spare ID vanished. The gate closed. The list moved on. That morning became a story about my lateness, my weakness, my poor preparation. This time, I arrived at Merit Hall at 7:52 beside Mrs. Pell and a security guard named Tomas who looked half asleep but wore a body camera blinking green on his chest. The hall was a cathedral of polished floors and anxious breathing. Candidates stood in dorm clusters beneath hanging banners that said excellence is discipline, which had always felt like something rich people invented after hiring cleaners.
Mina saw me first.
Her face did a beautiful little collapse before she repaired it into concern. She wore pearl earrings and my old cardigan. Sarah stood beside her with the room 509 folder tucked under one arm. Junie held 3 coffees, one for each of them, none for me. Around them, girls whispered because whispers are cheaper than courage. Livia, Mina called, and took a step forward as if we were friends meeting after a misunderstanding. Tomas shifted beside me. His camera light kept blinking. Mina saw it and stopped. Sarah's eyes dropped to the red temporary access sleeve in my hand, then to Mrs. Pell, then to the folder she was holding. She knew paperwork the way some girls know music. She understood rhythm, consequence, tempo. For the first time in either life, I watched her miss a beat. At the sign-in desk, the monitor asked for room 509 clearance. Sarah slid the folder forward before I could speak. "Our room is cleared," she said. "Livia created a little confusion this morning, but we handled it."
Handled it.
The phrase landed softly, already wearing a suit. The monitor opened the folder and frowned. "This clearance lists 4 residents." "Yes," Mina said quickly. "We're all here now." "No," Mrs. Pell said. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Some women carry authority like a clipboard. She carried it like a door shutting. Livia Arden returned her key at 6:09 and has been relocated under supervised accommodation pending review. She is not authorized to sign room 509 clearance and is not responsible for the condition or contents of that room after key surrender. The monitor looked from the folder to me. "Then this clearance is inaccurate." Sarah laughed lightly, the kind of laugh that tried to make rules feel embarrassed for existing. "It must be a timing issue. We didn't know she had done that. We signed based on ordinary residence status." Mrs. Pell took the folder, turned one page, and tapped the bottom. This was signed at 7:18. The key return was logged at 6:09. The emergency relocation email was sent to all residents at 6:24. Mina's lips parted. I had not known about the 6:24 email. Mrs. Pell had copied them. The academy had told them. They had signed anyway. A small sound moved through the nearby candidates, not quite a gasp, not quite a laugh.
Serais fastightend.
"I didn't see that email. But you signed that Livia was present and that her belongings had been inspected with the room," the monitor said. "Was she present?" 3 pairs of eyes flicked toward me. In my first life, I would have explained. I would have filled the silence with proof I was not guilty, because girls like me are trained to believe silence is dangerous. This time, I let the question stand in the air like a glass of water nobody wanted to drink.
Mina svalovid.
"She was supposed to be." Tomas's body camera blinked. The monitor wrote something on a form. "That is not what I asked." Their second mistake was believing the room itself would protect them. Cruel girls trust walls because so much of what they do happens behind them. The whispered dare, the hidden paper, the missing blouse, the cup moved just far enough to spill. The door locked for 1 minute, then 5, then until a future is gone. Room 509 had protected them once. This time, it had become a sealed box with their fingerprints inside. At 8:05, while the sign-in line stalled and candidates began craning their necks, the deputy housing director arrived with 2 security officers and a master access card. He looked irritated, which frightened my roommates more than anger would have. Anger can be argued with. Irritation means someone's schedule has been disrupted, and institutions punish disruptions with files. "We are conducting an immediate room integrity check," he said. "Room 509 residents will remain here." Sarah tried to protest that the exam gate would close. He looked at her over his glasses. "Then I suggest you cooperate quickly." The officers left for dormitory E. The rest of us waited under the banners. In my first life, waiting had been something done to me. This time, it was something I handed back. Mina twisted her pearl earring until her earlobe reddened. Junie stared at her phone, typing and deleting, typing and deleting. Sarah stood straight, folder against her chest, but her thumb rubbed the paper edge until it bent. People began whispering names. Not mine this time. The class monitor, Elodie, stepped closer and asked Mina whether everything was okay. Mina smiled too brightly. "Livia's just confused the staff." I almost admired the persistence. A fire could be climbing her skirt, and Mina would call it warm lighting. At 8:18, the deputy director's phone rang. He answered, listened, and closed his eyes for half a second. Then he looked at me. "Miss Arden, can you confirm whether you left any prohibited materials in room 509? "No," I said. "My exam materials are with me. My study materials are in supervised storage. I have not entered the room since returning my key." He turned to Sarah. Can you explain why Miss Arden's exam packet was found inside the locked wardrobe assigned to Miss Vey? Sarah's surname hit the air like a dropped tray.
Vey.
Sarah Vey, class vice president, debate champion, scholarship finalist, girl whose mother donated the West Garden benches with little brass plaques that said "Generosity Blooms." Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. The deputy director continued, each word flat enough to cut paper. Can you also explain why the room's internal latch was taped in a locked position, why a spare chair was wedged under the handle, and why a handwritten note reading "Wait until after gate close" was found in the bin? That note was not part of my first life, and for one breath I hated them more for inventing new cruelty. In the old timeline, they had not needed to write it down. Mina distracted me after the shower, Junie took my packet, Sarah locked the door, and the world did the rest. But maybe in this life, because I had returned the key early, because I had not walked into the trap on schedule, panic made them sloppy. They had prepared a lockout, and then needed to explain why I was not there to be locked out. They staged an abandoned room. They signed a false clearance. They planted my exam packet in Sarah's wardrobe, maybe to discover later and claim I hid it to accuse them. They wedged the door from inside, perhaps planning to say I barricaded it during a breakdown. They wrote themselves a reminder, because arrogance makes people think evidence only matters when someone else holds it. The deputy director asked again, "Who wrote the note?" Nobody answered. Around us, the sign in hall had gone quiet enough for the fluorescent lights to hum. The exam gate was still open, but the line had split around us like water around a stone. Candidates stared openly now. Teachers pretended not to. Sarah recovered first. "Anyone could have written that," she said. "This is exactly why Livia's behavior is concerning. She left suddenly. She has access to our things, and now conveniently there's a note. She returned her key at 6:09, Mrs. Pell said. She had no access. Master keys exist. Students do not have master keys. Then maybe someone is helping her." The accusation glanced off Mrs. Pell, struck Tomas's camera, and fell dead on the floor. The deputy director's expression changed. It was small, but I saw it, the moment an adult stops seeing a girl as difficult and starts seeing her as a liability. "Miss Vey," he said, "are you alleging staff misconduct?" Sarah's confidence faltered. In my first life, she understood how far to push before consequences reached her. In this life, she had lost the map. "I'm saying this is unfair." "So is signing a clearance for a student who had already been relocated," he replied. "So is possessing another candidate's exam packet. So is tampering with a resident's door on the morning of a ranking exam." Mina began to cry then, delicately, tears gathering without smudging her eyeliner. "We didn't know it was serious," she whispered. "We were just trying to teach her not to act superior." There it was. Not innocence. Not denial. Motive. Dressed in hurt feelings. The phrase "teach her" spread faster than any official announcement could have. It moved from the sign and desk to the back of the hall, from candidates to parents waiting outside, from phones hidden in sleeves to phones openly recording, because nothing attracts witnesses like a golden girl cracking under fluorescent light. Mina realized what she had said too late. She pressed her hand over her mouth, but the words were already living in other people's ears. Junie hissed her name. Sarah looked as if she might slap her. I stood still and felt something inside me unclench, so slowly it hurt. In my first life, I had spent years trying to prove they meant to hurt me. Years collecting scraps. The way they smiled, the timing of the door, the missing packet, the messages afterward, the little comments about girls who should know their place. But harm without confession becomes fog. People wave it away. They say misunderstanding, stress, finals, emotions, girls being girls. This time, Mina gave the fog a shape. The deputy director asked all 3 roommates to step out of the sign in line.
Sera refused.
"If we miss the gate, you'll be affecting our rankings." "Your rankings are under review," he said. "You cannot enter the exam hall until this matter is resolved." Junie finally looked up from her phone. "All of us." Her voice cracked on us. She had thought consequences would be selective, like kindness. The monitor collected their admission packets and placed them in a gray envelope marked "Hold." That envelope was small, ordinary and more final than any shouted punishment. Sarah reached for it. Tomas stepped forward. Not dramatically. Just enough. The green light blinked. Sarah withdrew her hand. I wanted to say something sharp then, something worthy of the moment, but the truth was quieter. Revenge did not feel like fire. It felt like standing dry under a roof while rain found the people who had stolen your umbrella. The monitor turned to me. Miss Arden, your supervised clearance is approved. Please sign here. My hand did not shake when I wrote my name. Across the hall, Mina sobbed harder. Junie whispered that this was not fair. Sarah stared at me with a hatred so pure it almost looked honest.
You planned this, she said. No, iyan suare.
I planned to keep my key out of your hands. That was the cruelest truth because it was so small. The exam itself was 3 hours long, and for the first time in either life, nobody sat close enough to steal my breath. My assigned desk was near the windows, where rain traced crooked lines down the glass and the city beyond the academy gates looked washed clean. Before the papers were distributed, the chief proctor announced that several candidates had been delayed due to administrative review and that no discussion of the matter would be tolerated. Everyone knew exactly which candidates. Everyone looked anyway. The empty seats in the dormitory E-cluster formed a gap like missing teeth. I opened my paper when instructed. The first question was about ethical responsibility in public institutions, which nearly made me laugh. There are moments when the universe has a sense of humor so sharp it should be registered as a weapon. I wrote steadily. Not perfectly. Not like a prodigy in a story who returns from death with every answer memorized and every enemy already defeated. My hands cramped. My back hurt. Halfway through section 2, I realized I had forgotten a case citation and had to build the argument from principle instead. Freedom did not make the exam easy. It made the difficulty belong to me. That mattered more. In my first life, every blank in my future had been carved by someone else's hand. This time every answer, strong or weak, was mine. When the final bell rang, I placed my pen down and felt no triumph, only a tired steadiness, as if I had been carrying a bucket of water across a burning field and finally reached stone. Outside the hall, candidates erupted into noise, relief, speculation, performance. Nobody asked me about the hardest question. They asked whether it was true room 509 had been sealed, whether Sarah's mother had arrived, whether Mina had confessed, whether Junie's messages had been pulled. I did not answer. Silence had become useful. At the supervised exit, Mrs. Pell waited with a paper cup of coffee she had not stirred with a pen. You did well, she said. I almost told her she had no idea. Instead, I asked, what happens now? She looked toward the administration building. Now the board decides whether this was a dorm dispute, an exam interference attempt, or coordinated candidate misconduct. And the list. Anyone under conduct hold is removed pending review. Removed. Such a neat word. Softer than scrubbed. Cleaner than erased. But I heard the blade inside it. By Wednesday, the academy stopped pretending it was a roommate misunderstanding. That was the day the corridor footage came back, and with it, the ghost of my first life finally found witnesses. The footage showed Mina leaving room 509 at 5:42 with my exam packet under her cardigan. It showed Junie taping the latch from inside while Sarah stood in the hallway checking her phone. It showed all three of them entering and leaving the room after the 6:24 relocation email, despite later signing that I had been present for clearance. It showed Sarah placing the packet in her own wardrobe, then opening the door for inspection with a startled face of someone rehearsing innocence. It showed Junie taking a photo of my empty corner and posting it to the group chat before any staff had declared me missing. It did not show my first life tears, my bruised knuckles, my missed gait, my years of shrinking under a story they wrote for me, but it showed enough. Institutions love enough. Enough gives them permission to act without admitting they failed before. On Thursday, the conduct board summoned me to a small room with glass walls and a long table polished so brightly I could see my own face hovering beneath my hands. Across from me sat the dean of candidates, the housing director, a legal liaison, and a student advocate who kept offering me tissues even though I was not crying. They asked me to recount the morning. I gave times, not feelings. Key returned at 6:09. Temporary relocation approved. Complaint received at 7:12. False clearance presented at 7:52. Room check initiated. Materials found. I had learned the hard way that pain makes adults uncomfortable, but timelines make them useful. When they asked why I returned the key early, I looked at my reflection in the table and chose the version of the truth they could process. I believed my access was being used to create risk, I said. I wanted the record to show exactly when my responsibility for the room ended. The legal liaison wrote that down quickly. The dean asked whether I feared retaliation. I thought of Mina's smile, Sarah's precision, Junie's laughing messages, the locked door that had lived in my chest for 6 years. Yes, I said. One word.
No de queraschen.
It landed harder that way. Their hearing happened Friday morning, the same day the provisional merit list was scheduled to be posted. In my first life, Friday was the day their names rose and mine disappeared.
Serave, rank 12. Mina Kalov, rank 19.
Junie Park, rank 23. Livia Arden, absent from final sign-in. People told me there would be other chances, as if chances were apples that grew back every season for girls who could not afford the orchard. This time, I stood outside the glass display case at noon with half the academy pretending not to stand behind me. The list was covered by a navy cloth, academy crest embroidered in gold. The dean gave a short speech about integrity, fairness, and the responsibility of candidates to uphold institutional trust. Speeches are where schools hide the ugliness of what happened in Polish language, but I listen anyway because Polish language can still cut the right people if the blade is turned carefully. Then he removed the cloth. My name was there. Not at the top, not glowing, not magically transformed into first place by suffering. Rank 14. Livia Arden. Scholarship eligible. Board commendation pending. I stared at the line until the letters stopped swimming. Rank 14 was not a fairy tale crown. It was better. It was real. Around me, people searched for the names that were missing. Sarah Vey was not there. Mina Callow was not there. Junie Park was not there. Beneath the list, a separate notice had been posted in smaller print. Candidates removed due to confirmed misconduct may not appeal merit list exclusion during the current cycle. 3 student numbers followed. No names, because the academy loved dignity once punishment became official. But everyone knew. Junie's friend began crying. Mina's boyfriend cursed under his breath. Sarah's mother stood near the marble column with her phone pressed to her ear, face white, one hand gripping her donated bench plaque brochure so hard it folded. I felt nothing for her. Not hatred. Not pity. She had raised a daughter who believed a poor girl's locked door was an acceptable strategy. Now she was learning that boards report adults too when interference leaves fingerprints. The report against my aunt came later, and maybe that is why the ending surprised me. I had expected the roommates to fall. I had expected the list to change. I had expected Sarah to fight, Mina to cry, Junie to blame everyone except herself. But I had forgotten that in both lives, cruelty had not lived only in room 509. It had been fed from home. My aunt had arranged that dorm placement after my parents died, smiling through the social worker meeting while promising to treat me like her own. She had also told me to be grateful for shared space, grateful for old uniforms, grateful Mina's family looked out for me, grateful Sarah included me in study circles, grateful Junie made me more sociable. In my first life, after the lockout ruined me, my aunt told the academy I had always been fragile. She signed a statement saying I misplaced items often and struggled under pressure. I learned about it years later when I requested my old file and found her signature under words that sounded kind until you realized they were a shovel. This time, because I returned my key early and triggered a formal review, the board pulled Guardian Communications. There it was, an email from my aunt sent Sunday night to Sarah's mother, discussing my habit of dramatic overreaction, suggesting that if I caused trouble before the exam, staff should be reminded not to indulge me. Attached was a scanned copy of my medical leave record from 2 years earlier, private information she had no right to share. The board did not call it betrayal. They called it unauthorized disclosure of student welfare records and guardian interference in candidate assessment. I liked their phrases better. They had teeth. On Friday afternoon, after the list was posted, the dean asked me to remain behind. He told me my aunt had been reported to the guardianship liaison and removed from my academic contact file pending investigation. He said the academy would arrange independent student support through graduation. He said I would not be required to return to her home unless I chose to. I sat very still because freedom sometimes arrives dressed as logistics, and if you move too quickly, you fear it might startle and run. Do you understand? He asked gently. I nodded. I understood that the door had opened wider than I planned. Mina tried to apologize that evening from a borrowed number. I knew it was her before she spoke, because she breathed like someone waiting for forgiveness to do the work for her. Livia, she whispered, I know you hate me. I was sitting on the infirmary bed with my packed crate beside me, watching sunset turn the old windows copper. I don't, I said. The truth startled both of us. Hatred requires a kind of closeness I no longer wanted to give.
Mina cried softly.
Sarah said it would just scare you. She said you always landed on your feet anyway. She said if you miss sign-in, maybe the list would finally make sense. There it was again, the belief that my success was a clerical error in their world. And what did you say? I asked. Silence. In that silence lived every borrowed cardigan, every hidden note, every time she smiled while someone else cut me. I didn't think it would go this far, she said. People always say that when consequences reach them, they rarely say where they thought it should stop. At my tears, my missed exam, my lost scholarship, my death in a room no one visited, it went exactly as far as you pushed it, I said. The difference is that this time, the door locked on your side. She sobbed then, messy and real, but I felt like I was listening from another building. When she asked if I would tell the board she had been pressured, I looked at the sunflower key sitting on my desk in an evidence bag Mrs. Pell had given me after the hearing. Bright yellow. Cheerful. Useless now. Tell them yourself, I said and hung up. Sarah never called. She sent one message from an unknown account. You think this makes you better than us? I deleted it. Junie posted a vague apology online about toxic academic environments and accountability, then removed it when comments filled with lock emojis. By Monday, all three had been scrubbed from the merit list permanently. Not suspended pending appeal. Not delayed. Scrubbed. The word appeared in the internal notice the dean sent to staff by accident and recalled 3 minutes later, which meant every student saw it. Scrubbed felt harsher than removed. Scrubbed meant stain. Scrubbed meant someone had pressed hard. I did not move back to room 509. The academy offered me a single room in the old prefect corridor, small and plain, with a window facing the chapel roof, and a lock that clicked cleanly when I turned it. The first night there, I unpacked slowly. Books on the shelf. Uniform in the wardrobe. Exam admission copy in the drawer. The plastic crate at the foot of the bed, because I still liked seeing everything I owned in one place. Mrs. Pell stopped by with a new key tag, a square blue one this time, and a housing form for me to sign.
No sunflower? I asked.
Her mouth twitched. Retired. I signed the form and held the new key in my palm. It was heavier than the old one. Maybe that was imagination. Maybe responsibility always feels heavier when it finally belongs only to you. After she left, I locked and unlocked the door 3 times. Not because I was afraid, but because I could. In the quiet that followed, I thought about my first life, the girl in the hallway with wet hair and bleeding knuckles, begging people who hated her to open a door they had no right to close. For years, I had believed I needed someone to witness that girl before she could be saved. A teacher, a board, a friend, a future version of myself with enough power to punish everyone. But the truth was smaller and harder. The first witness had to be me. I had to stop explaining why I deserved to enter and start recording who held the lock. That was the lesson my second life gave me before any exam, before any ranking, before any public downfall. Never argue with a locked door when you can return the key. Step into the hallway and let the people inside explain why they barricaded an empty room. Graduation came 6 weeks later under a white tent on the East Lawn because the assembly hall roof leaked and the academy preferred ceremonies without buckets. My name was called for scholarship placement, board commendation, and something called resilience recognition, which sounded like an award invented by people who wanted to praise survival without discussing who made it necessary. I walked across the stage anyway. Not for them. For the girl who once stood outside room 509 and thought a missed gate was the end of the world. For the woman I had been when that missed gate became a life. For the quiet, practical miracle of a key returned at 6:09. In the front row, Mrs. Pell clapped with both hands, her coffee balanced dangerously under her chair. Tomas, the security guard, nodded once from the aisle. The dean shook my hand and said, "You earned this." I believed him, but not because he said it. I believed it because nobody had handed it to me through pity, nobody had stolen it through charm, and nobody had locked it behind a door. After the ceremony, I walked past dormitory E1 last time. Room 509's window was open. The curtains fluttered out like pale hands. New students would live there next term, girls who knew nothing about the sunflower key, the wedged chair, the note in the bin, or the 3 names scrubbed from the list. That was fine. Not every victory needs a monument. Some only need a lock that no longer turns for the wrong people. I dropped the old sunflower key tag, returned me after evidence processing, into the donation box outside the dorm office. It landed among broken lanyards, old badges, and forgotten room numbers, with a soft plastic clatter. Then I walked away with my blue key in my pocket and my name on the merit list, not at the top, not carved in gold, but exactly where it belonged, inside a future nobody else could enter without permission.